Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Peter Kelly. All right, Peter, give everybody the 2-minute spiel on what you're doing today, but hold it to today, Peter, because this is a podcast about you and your journey, and I don't want to leak anything just yet.
Sure. So I can give you a bit of background about myself, Bill. So I'm currently the VP of Engineering at Tigera. Tigera is the company behind Project Calico, which a lot of people in the Kubernetes world will be familiar with. I'm actually based in Cork in Ireland, so it's a little bit later in the day here for me. And I manage the engineering org, so that includes all of our engineers across Tigera in Vancouver and some dotted around North America, including the Bay Area as well.
Nice, man. My last name is Kennedy, as you know, and my dad always told me we were from County Cork, but
No way.
I don't know why that side of the family didn't live very long. Well, my dad lived till he was 85. I never got to meet his father or anybody, so I never got. The other half of me is Italian, and those people just don't die, right? So I have all of this sort of knowledge about the Italian side and Sicily, and have it's sad actually for me. I'm sad about it. Other than I was told we were from County Cork, though I was always told that the Kennedys were prevalent in Tipperary for some reason. I don't know, dude. It's sad. I wish I knew more.
Yeah. Have you ever been over to Cork or Ireland?
I've been to Dublin. Actually, I'm going to go again this year on my way back from Berlin because my wife and I were like, why are we not doing that? Right. I love Jameson, Peter. Like if we were actually in a bar right now, I'd be drinking some Jameson, man. I don't know.
Well,
It's so good.
if you come to Cork, I'll bring you to the Jameson distillery. There's a fantastic experience here. You can see how it's all done. Every barrel of Jameson whiskey is produced here in Cork.
In Cork, because I'm going to do the tour in Dublin, but I thought the one in Dublin was also, but it's all in Cork.
It's all in Cork for Jameson. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
ooh, okay. Now that's on my new bucket list, man.
Nice.
Anyway, that's really cool. Okay, this is a podcast about you and your journey and how you sort of got here. We're going to talk for the next hour and a half. But I always have two initial questions. I don't know if you've heard any shows, but two initial questions. So the first one is going to be, what year was it when you say graduated high school? And I'm assuming you were in Ireland there in County Cork at the time, or where were you on the planet at the time?
That's right. So it would have been 1999.
99. Okay.
99, and in Cork in Ireland. So we call it secondary school here. So we don't have a middle school, high school, or middle school and high school is combined into secondary school. So it was around 1999. That's when I graduated high school or secondary
And
school.
I'm guessing you were like 17, 18 at the time, like.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
18 years old. Exactly.
99. Okay, perfect. But here's the second question now. Clear your head, clear your mind. Do not think very hard here, Peter. I want the first memory that pops in your head of you hacking on a computer. First one.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my older brother's Commodore 64, which he got as a Christmas present back in the 80s. And I think it was BASIC that he was hacking with. And it was super basic, excuse the pun, but it was literally just a small program that would repeat the same characters on the screen, and you could kind of do ASCII art with it, and it was a lot of fun. But I remember that Commodore 64. The first time we tried to load a game, we sat there for hours waiting for it to load, not realizing you just had to press any key. It was already loaded, and we were sitting there on Christmas morning for like 2 hours staring at the screen. Yeah, so that's my first memory.
How much older is he? Because in the 80s, you were fairly young if you graduated in.
He's 5 years older than me, so
Okay.
yeah.
That's really cool. Go on, sorry.
He's in software as well now, actually, funnily enough. So yeah.
Nice. Oh, you're wishing you still had that Commodore, right? Like you're wishing you hadn't thrown it away.
Absolutely. They've classic status now. They go for quite a price, I think. So
I know. I had a K Pro too, and It kills me to think that I threw that thing away at some
Oh, yeah,
point, even when it broke, right? Like,
no, I know.
but you don't think about it at the time. You just think I'm upgrading my computer, so we're moving on. All right, that's really cool. So basic at an early age. Yeah, my first programming language was basic too.
Yeah,
I think for people our age, the computers all came with basic, and that's kind of what you started hacking on at the time.
exactly, exactly, 100%.
I feel like I was too old for the Commodore, even though I saw one. And I got lucky enough to, like I said, I had that K Pro, and then I got some MS DOS. My parents were not wealthy. I don't know how they ever actually got a computer in the house, and they were like expensive. I remember like $1,500 in 1986, I think, for that
Wow.
K Pro. I know. I don't know how my mom and dad did it. To be honest with you, they didn't have that kind of money when I think back on it.
Yeah, we were the same. We were the same. We were very lucky to get one. Um, Same with the consoles. We had from the Spectrum and then onto the NES, the original NES, original Mega Drive, and then yeah, we were so demanding as kids, but our I don't know how our parents kept us happy.
What did your parents do?
Yeah,
What did your
so
parents? Yeah.
yeah, my mother worked in she worked for a government, the electricity board, kind of like a state department, and my dad worked in retail, so he was like a retail manager for a department store. So he's a great salesman. So he would sell you anything. He'd still sell you anything. Uh,
He could sell. We say when a salesman's that good. At least we say here, like he could sell ice to the Eskimos.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So he has. In Ireland, we call it the gift of the gab. The gift of the gab. So he's
Nice.
a good talker, and still is. So maybe I learned a bit of salesmanship from him, but um, which is a rare skill in engineering, I think. My mom, yeah, it was pretty fascinating in Ireland at the time. Just going back one generation, when my mother got married to my father, she had to give up her job. You couldn't work a state job as a married woman back in Ireland
Really?
in that time. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. What do you think that rule was all about? Was that just to? Yeah. What do you think that rule was about? I mean, I could think of some things, but
Yeah, I think it was like the kind of religious influence on the family unit and at the time in Ireland. So there was a lot of kind of mixing of church and state back then. So I think that's where that came from. Yeah,
man, your mom must have really loved your dad. I mean, she had to
yeah,
give up her job and
right.
and everything, right?
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you ever have these conversations? Are your parents still alive?
They are luckily
Oh,
both.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like these are the fun conversations to have with them now, especially at your age. Like, mom, what were you thinking about when you did you really almost not marry my dad because you had to quit? Like these are the questions I'd be asking.
and parents are so funny. They're so willing to tell you these crazy stories now. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Isn't it funny? Like when you're a kid, your parents are like secretive, right? They don't want to tell you nothing.
that's
And
right.
then as they get older, if you poke them a little bit, they start telling you some crazy stories. As a kid, you always think your parents are perfect and they know everything, right? And you as a parent, right? You don't know what's going on, man.
Oh,
You're winging it.
I don't have a clue what's going on. I mean, my eldest just turned 14, and she's going to teenage discos here in Ireland, and it's a whole other world of parenting that I don't understand. So we're all trying to figure it out together. We're in parents, kind of like support groups for parents at the moment in the school, trying to figure it all out as we go. And you kind of realize nobody has it figured out, really.
No, nobody does, but the kids don't know that. Like you can't let them know that, right? Like they don't know that. They think you've got it all figured out.
That's right.
Oh, that works to your advantage at some level if you can keep that back in the back of your head.
That's right.
It's wild. All right, let's talk about your last 4 years of secondary school because those are like the formation years. Like, what were you doing in those 4 years? Were you in any sports, arts? Were you just focused on engineering? Like, talk about those 4 years.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't apply myself academically. I always had a bit of a problem with how our school systems and how our subjects were taught. So it was always a battle between me and the teachers to apply myself. And when I applied myself, I was fine academically, but it was just the willpower to actually apply myself. So I loved sports. I was all about sport in secondary school. I played a lot of football, soccer. I was a goalkeeper, so I played for the school team and one of the clubs in the area, and that was definitely my passion at the time, and a little bit of golf here and there. Um, Arts, kind of more on the technical side again. Like in the school I went to was big on, carpentry, metalwork, technical graphics, technical drawing. So I kind of like towards technical drawing. And that was definitely an interest of mine back then. Something I kind of have forgotten about really until talking to you about it. I haven't thought about that in years, but that was a big passion of mine at the time. But yeah,
And that
so
was offered in school. That stuff was off because wow.
it was, yeah. So we have like you can take elective subjects in secondary school. You have to take at least six subjects, and there's this point system for entry to college. So let's say you got 100% in six subjects, that's 600 points, and different courses have different points to access them. For example, if you wanted to do medicine, you might have to get like 580 points. You know, you can barely miss a mark across your six subjects. There's some core subjects you have to take, and then you can elect to take others. So depending on the school you go to, those elective subjects can be quite broad. So the school I went to was very heavy on those kind of physical activities like woodworking, metalworking, technical graphics, and then other schools would be stronger in languages. So you may be able to take Latin as an example, or Spanish or other languages,
And
and
you could choose the school you wanted to go to because of the electives.
you can now obviously within geographical restrictions in terms of just practicality wise, but yeah, you can choose. Yeah,
Oh, so like if you were more into the arts, you could have gone to that school, or your parents would have, say, moved closer to a school that
potentially,
tailored
yes,
to that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly.
You know, they do a little bit of that in Miami with these schools where, like the two kids here, they're going into some international school where they're really prepping them hard for college. Like college is everything about this. There's no sports in this school. Like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I say the same thing. Wow, right? Like you're missing a whole set of high school sort of sports. But there's another school that's all for the arts. So if you're into theater and stuff, you kind of go to that high school. And it's the same thing, right? You still got to do your math and your English or whatever that is, but
That's right.
all the electives are sort of tailored towards that. Which wasn't like that for me. Like you lived in a school district, that's where you were going, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah, that
But
was it. Yeah.
you know, the thing I don't like about the school here in Miami, like I said, right? That school, we have to drive them to the school. It's like 20 minutes away. And I think what happens here in Miami is you don't meet anybody in your neighborhood,
Oh, I see.
right? Because you're missing a whole social aspect of your neighborhood. When I was a kid, right? And I grew up, I graduated high school in 87, Peter, right? So I'm a
Yes,
kid of like from the 70s. Dude, we got on our bike and we went everywhere. And you hung out with the kids you went to school with because they were your neighbors.
exactly.
And I feel like that's been completely lost, at least here in Miami. It's been completely lost because all these kids are going to schools that are not part of their neighborhood.
That's interesting. Where did you grow up though? It wasn't
I,
in
I
Miami.
grew up in New York. I grew up
Yeah.
on Long Island.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up on Long Island. This idea of charter schools and special schools and all that. You went to your neighborhoods, and there were rivalries between the
Yeah.
schools, right? Because you lived in that. Like you might even fight on a weekend just because a bunch of kids from the
In
football
schools.
team showed up somewhere, and we were there too, right?
Right, right.
Like all that's gone, man. Like it's all gone.
That's interesting. Yeah, we're lucky here that the three kids currently go to three different schools because they're different ages, and in Ireland there's still a all boys, all girls school concept. Like mixed schools
Really?
is yeah, mixed schools are the exception.
Oh,
So the norm here is single sex schools. So they're all in three different schools at the moment, but they're all walkable from home, which is just a godsend. Being able to walk up and down and home from school. So very very lucky. But I definitely have seen similar. People are driving even a mile down the road to school. People are in the car and they're driving their kids down to school, and I think it's just a car dependency aspect as well has crept in here. But we are very lucky in terms of walkability, and like that, it's you get to see all the neighbors, you get to see all of the other parents every morning walking up and down and having a chat. So there's a sense of community around it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really strong aspect. We take it for granted, I think, in Ireland sometimes because of this, how community focused some of the towns and cities are here still. So we're lucky.
But even when I lived in Fort Lauderdale, I have 5 kids from my first marriage, and I basically adopted these 2 younger ones now when I got married again. The bus stop was the big thing when for my first 5 kids. The entire community would go to the bus stop. They would like hang out for another hour after the kids got on the bus, man. Just, but like all that's lost, man. Cool. So soccer is a big thing. Did you think you were gonna play professionally, semi-professionally?
Some part of me still does, maybe like a scout from Liverpool Football Club will want an aging goalkeeper. Yeah, all the time. This is very funny. So at my wedding, my my mom kind of sabotaged me in front of uh, our guests by finding and reading out these letters that I wrote to all the clubs in the Premier League in England, like pitching myself as a 14-year-old for a trial. So yeah, that was definitely my dream. Um,
Wow.
yeah, but it got lost as reality set in.
It's hard, man. It's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah,
Dude, I loved baseball, and I ran track. But on the baseball side, I don't think I grew until I was like 21, man. I was like 5 foot, maybe 110 pounds wet, right?
okay,
And I loved playing. But at some point in high school, right? At some point in those like last 2 years of secondary school, if you don't start to grow and get to 6 feet and weigh 200 pounds, it
right,
just doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter, right? You're just not mature enough physically to play at that level.
gotcha. Okay,
I was a bit, and I'm still not that big of a guy, right? But it's a bummer, right? Like some people just win the DNA, the
yeah,
DNA lottery. It
absolutely,
wasn't me.
exactly. Yeah, that's tough when there's a physical barrier to the sport. Like soccer is a little bit different, I guess, in all shapes and sizes, but it's intensely competitive. Like even people who do make it to professional football clubs rarely actually make the grade to, professional contracts. When they join them as youth players, it's just extremely competitive. And I always kind of wonder what happens to those guys who I had a few buddies who went over to England and went to top level clubs but didn't quite make it. Must be crushingly disappointing and to get so close and then
Yeah.
kind of be cast aside and have to find something else to do with your life. It's a pretty tough gig.
I had a buddy that made it all the way to they call it the show in Major League Baseball, right? As a pitcher. And then after 2 years threw his shoulder out. But he had the college education, luckily, going into that. So he ended up falling back into finance, and he's like a director of a big finance like accounting group, right? Like he found a career that he could follow. But the guys that don't finish the university, let's say, they go right from sort of grade school. It is a scary situation because especially in today's world, like if you don't have that paper today, it's
Right.
ridiculously hard. I got a niece and a nephew that just don't have the paper for whatever reason. And the doors right now are shut on them because there's so many people that have it, right? It's not that they're not capable of doing whatever the jobs are, but it's even worse today than it was, say, 20 years ago.
That's interesting. You can't even get an interview or a callback, I'd imagine, right?
Can't get an interview, right? Like, no matter how much self study my nephew does, this kid, just a side story, right? This kid is one of the smartest human beings on the planet, but his parents never promoted it. So he never really went beyond high school and had to work, say, mechanical jobs, right? But the kid is just like, if I had his brain for a week, Peter, what I could do with that brain, right? And I've had him take all the online classes. I had him do the boot camps. Every time he tries to put his resume in for anything around programming, data science, data analysis, all the stuff that he can do. You don't have the paper on the resume. Nobody wants to talk to him because there's 100 other resumes there with the degree, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
I'm like pushing him now to say, dude, I'm sorry, man, but you're gonna have to now go get the AA. You're gonna have to do it. Start there, right? And it's just the world we live in. With I don't know if it's a function of all the people we hired during COVID that then we dropped,
Right.
and they're all out there, right? But the point back to the story with the sports is like when I see these kids not finishing their university, at least in the States, it scares me because that paper's just become so important.
It's so important. And I wonder how much, yeah, like you mentioned, the big correction that happened, but also wonder how much screening is done by AI now, where it's just you're never going to get past that first screening anymore. Maybe that's why there's a big difference from like 20 years ago, let's say.
So with my company, there's one we don't do any of that. I've refused to use any of the tooling. I don't care how many resumes we have. I have a guy that talks to everybody first. And if the personality is like there, I talk to everybody. In fact, the first thing I do on every interview, Peter, is I ask somebody to send me their resume. I'm not even looking at it until I'm on screen. Actually, if somebody can't get me their resume within 60 seconds because they have my email address, it's already a red flag, right? Like
Right.
you're going after a programming job and you can't get me your resume in 60 seconds.
Says a lot.
It's actually become part of my interview process at this
Right.
point, you know?
That's
And it
interesting.
happens, dude. I've had people that like 3 minutes in and they still can't get me their resume. And I'm just like, you're interviewing for a job, dude. You don't have it.
Right. Exactly.
It's wild, right?
That is wild.
But I want to talk to everybody. Here's a funny story. I had a guy that sent me his resume. The resume was in pretty bad shape. Okay. So I sent him feedback to fix the resume. And he was pushing back a little bit, but something in my brain said, I know this is a good guy. So I went back and forth with him for like 2 weeks over email. He finally listened to me, got his resume in really good shape. Long story short, I ended up being able to hire him for a job. And he's like one of the top engineers that I have on my team.
Okay.
But his resume was so bad coming in that you would never in a million years have called him.
There you
You
go.
would never have, right?
Yeah.
But me working with him on the resume and then starting to really understand who he was as an engineer was, so that's why I just, the tooling scares me. I don't care about scale. But you can't do it. You don't have scale. I don't want to hear it. Like you're missing people.
Yeah, you just cannot judge by CV alone. It's impossible by a resume alone. So we eyeball every single application that comes into Tigera, every single one. We sit down in front of it and look at it, look at the LinkedIn profile, and then obviously somebody talks to that person initially as well. So, yeah, we don't use any AI tooling in our process, in our recruiting process at all. Yeah, I mean it is wild. I've had some interesting interesting interviews in my past. Going back a couple of companies ago, this is when it was definitely a job seekers market back then. People were jumping around jobs, and you could double your salary and your
Yeah.
cash comp quite easily, right? You were the person in demand, and that kind of bled through into some of the interview stories that I have. But one of the ones that stands out for me is getting on a call with a DevOps engineer. He was based in the Bay Area, and I was taking the call from Cork in Ireland, and he was in his hot tub. He had he was in his hot tub with no top on, with his laptop floating on something in front of him. I swear to God.
No, I would have just hung up the call, bro. I would have been
Yeah,
like, we're done.
it didn't last very long.
No, dude, we're done. That's mind blowing, dude. I think some of the problem is, and when I interview people, I give them feedback during the interview too. If they're not getting feedback, nobody's telling them they have food on their face.
Right.
And so they go into the next interview with food on their face. By the time I'm done interviewing somebody, I've pointed out all the red flags that I've seen, or at least yellow flags and resume problems. And I say, even if I don't hire you, just fix these things because this is what's potentially holding you back, right?
I like that.
It's
That's great.
I just think it's good to be honest with people, not like cruel honest, but like just yeah. Everybody deserves it because sometimes I'm like the first interview they've been able to get in 3 months because again I'm talking to everybody, right? In fact, I just hired another guy who had for sure flaws. I won't tell you what the flaws were on the resume, but for sure flaws on the resume that was holding him back, right? And I don't know. I think everybody should do that to people.
I think that's a good philosophy. I think if somebody doesn't get selected for the job, but they've been through your interview process, they should come away from it feeling good about it, not feeling kind of terrible about it, you know. So yeah, feedback can definitely feed into that. Not
Yeah,
trying to,
and
yeah,
what was you see you've done this long enough. You see the red flags everywhere, right? I tell you, 100% of the time they didn't realize that was a red flag because they don't
exactly.
have people to help them with it, you know. Okay, so you want to be a professional footballer. Secondary school is about to end.
Hmm.
You've thrown all those since you're 14. You've been trying to do it, which is the right age, right? It's either going to happen when you're younger or not. So, what is Peter going to do now when secondary school's over?
Yeah, that was a great question, and um, you have to. It's really tough at that age in Ireland. We have this point system, like I mentioned, right? So you have to select your course that you want to do in college and university before you leave secondary school. And
So, by 17, you have to figure it all out.
you
It's
have to
crazy, right?
pick your degree.
Yeah, you have to know what you want to do.
You have to pick your track in life.
Yeah,
It's crazy
crazy.
to think about. It really is. It's there's a lot of pressure on that decision. So if you want to go into a specific industry, if you want to be an accountant, or if you want to be a software engineer, or a mechanic, or a doctor, you have to make that decision at 17. You have to fill out a form that says this is my first preference course and the college I want to go to. And if you get the points for that, you have to accept it. So you can't say, "Oh no, I've changed my mind. I'm going to go for a different course." It's tough luck. You filled out the form, you got the points.
Really?
You're now in that course. Yeah. So there's a lot
That's
of
it.
pressure. That's it.
So either you're doing that or you're not going at all.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have a choice. It's quite an intense process. Now there are other back doors. You can go to like a bridging kind of course, and but it takes longer. So there is a lot of pressure on that, and parents have a lot of influence, obviously, in terms of trying to guide their kids into like a specific. Well, I'm in finance, so you should do the course that I did in the same college that I went to. So there's definitely a bit of that happening. My parents were very supportive, and they were just saying do something that you enjoy doing, and that was tough. Looking through the courses, trying to see a match, but obviously then with how much I was enjoying messing around with computers at the time, it was a natural fit. So in Cork, we were lucky. We are lucky. We have a really good university, like a world class university, and we also have an Institute of Technology. It was called Cork Institute of Technology at the time. It's now university status, so it's changed its name to Munster Technology University, I believe, recently. So I went to the IT. It was a little bit more practical and hands-on. So I put my kind of form in for that, got accepted, got the points in my final exams, and yeah, so I was off on a 4-year degree course in it was,
What was your second choice? I'm just curious. If you missed it by 1 point, you missed it by 1 point, Peter.
yeah.
What was the next thing
I
on your
had
list?
I think I had 3 courses listed, right? I had this course was called Software Development and Computer Networking. So it was like a computer science degree, but there was a very hands-on
Like a
networking
lab? Yeah,
lab.
yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
exactly. Which
Yeah.
the IT college was kind of renowned for having more of a practical element to it. The second choice was traditional computer science in UCC, in the main university in Cork. And then my third choice, I think, was multimedia studies in Dublin, in University College Dublin, UCD. So there were
Does
my 3 choices. Yeah,
does each option require less points? So you have yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. So I got my number one option, which I was happy with. But yeah, it goes down in points.
I'm
exactly.
just curious, if you don't get into any three schools, then what just happens? You go work at a bar or something like
Yeah, you can apply again the next year.
okay.
With the points you have, you can, and it's a slight moving target as well, which can be really tough on people. Medicine could be 570 last year, and depending on the number of people interested and other factors, it can change to like 580 this year,
Oh.
and you get
But you can't
570
get any more points at that point. You've
more points.
graduated, right? Like
Yeah,
you're locked in at that point. There's nothing, no other
no,
way to get the points.
you're locked in now. You can do these like continuing education classes and kind of backdoor into universities will accept you here for other reasons and other kind of qualifications and experience. The main path from secondary school to college is all based around the points you get.
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
I would have been in so much trouble, man. I was so immature in that high school, secondary school, really immature. And my grades were at best like on a scale of 100, I was getting 70, 75s, right? Like C student the whole way.
Right.
Like when I hear about these sorts of systems and you hear about it in India, and now I'm hearing about here and you hear about in Europe, right? Like I would have been in trouble. I'd be pushing a broom right now, dude, because
It's
I
tough.
didn't have it at the time. I was too immature.
I was very similar. I just never applied myself, and I was a crammer in school. I was like a world class crammer. So I was like pulling all nighters, and I would get the information into my head, and I would regurgitate it on paper, and then forget it ever happened. And it was quite a stressful experience, but I somehow managed to get through it and get into this course. I'd like to say I knew what I was doing, that this was, I knew I was going to have a good
This was
career
the
in,
plan.
yeah, yeah, but definitely wasn't,
So then,
yeah.
so this is like a 4-year program, right? Like a traditional, you end up with a 4-year degree at the end of it. Do you get to move out of the house because you're living on campus?
I
You get
didn't.
that?
I didn't. No, unfortunately, I didn't have the full university experience. I was at home. We sent my older sister off to Thames Valley University in London. She took all the money, so that was all the college money gone, which I still remind her about. I I was no, I was at home. I was at home. Yeah, which is a different experience when you're in university. It has pros and cons as well.
Did you think about that at the time? I mean, it's easy to look back on it now and think, man, I would have preferred to be on campus. But at the time, was that sort of in your head?
It wasn't as not so much. I did have one Dublin course on my list. I had a girlfriend at the time who was going to university in Dublin, so that would have dovetailed nicely. It didn't work out, so maybe that was meant to be. Um, yeah, it's not uncommon for people to live at home in Ireland when they're in university, especially if they go to one in their local town, in their local area. It's not as prevalent as the United States, where pretty much everyone leaves home as soon as they go to university, right?
I kicked
Yeah.
the kids out of the house too.
Oh,
A
yeah,
couple of
really.
them wanted to go to a local school, and I said, no, no, you're going out. You're going. I don't care where you go, but you can't be within an hour from this house.
Wow.
Go.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, because I didn't want that for them. I didn't want them to be in the house. I didn't want even the ability for, let's just say, me or their mom to ask them to do something.
right.
You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Because now you're home. It's like, hey, I need you to go. No, like, get out of here.
get out of here. I think it's the independence as well that you develop living at a home. You have to kind of fend for yourself to a large degree, and There's a kind of a rite of passage almost. So I'll be encouraging my kids to fly to Coop and go explore other options. 100%. I think it's a fantastic opportunity if you can do it. I wasn't lucky enough to do it. I was living at home, free food, free lodging for 4 years, which is the good side of it.
Did you have to? So then you didn't have a job those 4 years either.
I did. So I did. I'm being a little bit facetious about freeloading. I did actually. One of my favorite jobs I ever had was I started when I was 16 actually, when I was still in secondary school, just on the weekends and in the summer, working in the cinema, the local cinema in Cork. And it was 5 years I think I stayed at the cinema. My first job was a 5 year stint.
Wow. So you were there while you were at university too, then.
I was exactly. I started in 1997 in the cinema just when Titanic came out.
Do the people trash the theaters with popcorn like in Ireland as they do in the States? Because that's mind blowing to me. It's like somebody's going to pick this up. So you can't do it in my own living room, but I can do it here. It's
It's
mind
crazy,
blowing
right?
to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a large part of my job was sweeping up popcorn.
It's just it's mind blowing to me how that. Yeah, I see it. But theaters have gotten really nice now, man,
Yeah,
with the
that's a
seats,
different
right?
experience now. Yeah, like back then, man, back then it was all film as well. It's all digital now, and I even worked for a digital cinema company building software for their screens that they could like coordinate ads and films across their theaters in the UK later in my career. But back then it was all films, so you had to splice together the film. It was delivered like by trucks on these giant reels. You had to carry them in, and then you had to like run it through to make sure everything was working. So we got to watch every movie like a couple of days before it was.
Oh, just to make sure the film was good.
Yeah, so we'd invite all
Oh,
the
I never
staff to
thought about that. Oh,
special
wow.
screenings. Yeah,
So what it
that's
was like, you just went to work that day and like before the theater opened and you got to run
that's
the
right.
film?
Yeah, we do it before the theater opened or after the theater closed, and we'd have get the staff in. It was really fun, especially for big movies like the Phantom Menace. When Star Wars came back out again, there was a big hype around who was going to get to see it first. So we got to see that a couple of days
Did you
before.
get to have popcorn too, or the concessions were closed to you guys?
Oh, we got all the
Oh,
stuff.
okay. That's cool.
Yeah, it was pretty
No,
good.
that's super. How many times did you find flaws in the film? Was it
Quite a lot
common?
actually. Yeah, it was, and
Oh,
the projectors would break down quite a bit. Um, the film would just stop and break off, and we'd have to give like comps back to people to come back another day. So
oh, wow.
yeah, there was a lot of maintenance in those machines. We had six screens, and at any one time there was probably a problem with like at least one projector.
Did you get to work on any of that? Did you do any of the splicing and the?
I
Did you
didn't.
get to see
No,
any
I
of that?
got
No.
I got to watch a lot of it, but yeah, I was a bit too young to be entrusted with that at the time.
That's cool. So
Yeah.
you kept that job all the way like at some point through, not completely through university. So did the university have opportunities for internships at that point?
We did work experience in fourth year. Was it third year or fourth year? I'm trying to remember. Third year. So we did work experience in the third year of our degree. So that's 6 months work placement paid, and
Nice.
that's still the case now. So we typically would take interns. We go and look at the kind of final year projects, third year projects now, and with the two local universities. I love it. It's fantastic. You get these like incredibly smart kids. Like they're not institutionalized or beaten down yet by the industry, and you can get them in early and get them working on interesting things. So I love taking interns from colleges in my career, different companies. So I did that in third year. I went out to Irish Life and Permanent. It's like a bank in Ireland. I did 6 months there, and I ended up working there for almost 5 years after college as well.
That was your first job after
My first
university.
job. Yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
was telling the 17-year-old who starts university in the fall, um, to find a program. She wanted the hands-on, so she found programs that had the lab stuff like you're talking about, which was great. But I also said make sure that they have the internships, because that's going to lead to your first job, especially in this economy, the way it's going right now, right? Where it's really hard to find that first job.
That's right.
If the internship can turn into that, it sets you off. Like you could save almost 8 months trying to find a job, just that alone.
100%. And the first job I got was, it wasn't in software development, but it was in the IT department, and that was enough for me. That was part of my work experience, and I took that position, and then I internally managed to get onto the development team that was building the online banking system. Um, so that's kind of how I kind of weaseled my way into the software development aspect. I didn't qualify into a software development role from college. I kind of worked my way in there.
Proved
So
yourself in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like once you're in that IT department, once you're in that company, you can kind of make your own kind of path, I think, if you're willing.
So this is like the year 2000, right? So, well, you started a little early, but let's say after you graduated, like 2000. What's the tech stack at this bank? I have to imagine it's an AS400, Peter. It's not.
It's
It's not
COBOL, yeah,
micro.
it's a
Yeah.
mainframe. So like my
Yeah.
my first job was monitoring the mainframe jobs that would run every night. So we would sit there we did shifts like 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., like 9 to 5, and then 4 p.m. to midnight. And the 4 p.m. to midnight one was like the graveyard shift. And that's when all the batch processing jobs would run in the bank and process all of the reports and bank transfers and checks and everything else. And our job was to monitor that, look at the terminal, and when something horrible and scary happened, look at the playbook and trying to understand, what should I press, Y or N, right? What's going to be the impact if I get this wrong? And if you don't know, you pick up the phone to the on-call guy who just knows everything. He's been there for like 20, 30 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he gets paid like $500 for answering the phone for like 30 seconds. So that was the job, and we had like replaced the tape in the mainframe, right, and like it was right there next to us, and in these special rooms, these kind of fireproof rooms, and we got to like replace the tapes, and
But
quite,
those systems rarely went down, dude.
oh yeah,
Like, let's be
oh yeah,
honest.
yeah,
Like, that thing was solid, dude.
oh,
They still
100%,
are today, right?
rock solid, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I moved into the development side, then it was all .NET, VB.NET.
Yeah.
Yes, all VB.NET, and this was, I don't even think C Sharp was out yet.
Yeah, I'd say 2002 is like when I started. 2002, 2003 was C sharp.
Okay,
So yeah, you're a couple years before that at this point, right? Yeah.
so it was on all ASP.NET, IIS, that full Microsoft stack, Microsoft
But
partnership.
they were using that for the bank terminal.
No,
They were
this was for the online banking website.
the customer
Yeah,
facing
customer facing.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's what I
Okay.
ended up working on. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Um, and it kind of gave me a lot of insight into how software development works, and interesting things like I learned that the full platform, the full build, only built on one person's machine at the
Back
time.
then.
Most
Yeah.
He was the most experienced guy in the company, and it only built on his machine. You couldn't repeat that build anywhere else.
No, there's no CI
It
CD,
was the
man.
most
That was somebody's machine.
that didn't even exist as a term. I think
I'm
CIC.
more interested in how you were interacting with the data. Were you pulling the data off the mainframe into traditional databases to access
Exactly.
it? Yeah.
That's exactly how we were doing it. Yeah. So there was like a translation or transforming layer that would happen, this batch job, into an SQL server or servers. And yeah, that's exactly how we were doing it. Yeah.
One of my very first job, there was an AS400 involved for a bunch. It was a printing company, really, but and I had to do that sort of stuff. The AS400 guys would dump everything on tape, and then I bought my own tape reader to get it off the tape into some format, right, that we're used to working with. There was Ethernet on these things, but there was no real sort of direct interaction, which is probably good, which is why the things were so stable.
It's
Right.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I played a little bit with some of that stuff. Again, I'm older than you anyway, but um, I got to see the punch cards, but I never got to play with one. Like that
Okay.
was finally going away in like 88. In 88, it was like they weren't teaching it. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. That would have
There's
been cool. I would love
I
to.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the stories I hear about that. I'm not sure that was my gig. All right, so you're at the bank for 5 years. Talk to me about what happens. So you've graduated already. You're like 3 years after graduation at that point, right? We're talking now maybe 2003. Give it, yeah. So what happens at that point? Why leave the bank?
You know, I was really into it, into software development. I really wanted to learn about everything. So I was reading a lot of books. I was, devouring. At the time, it was the Gang of Four design patterns, right? It was that kind of object-oriented programming, and some of my colleagues were maybe more kind of coasting along. They were happy enough in the bank, and it wasn't obviously a software-driven company or industry. Maybe a little bit slower to adopt new technologies at the time, at least in Ireland. So that's not the case now. Some of the banks are incredibly advanced and uh, cutting edge. But so I decided I wanted to work for a company that was primarily a technology company. But obviously within the sphere of Cork at the time. So my kind of radius was roughly the Cork area, maybe Dublin. So I was looking around at the time, and I saw a really interesting company which is called Snap-on Diagnostics, which you're probably familiar with, like Snap-on tools, like the actual
Yeah, I've heard of Snap-on
wrenches.
tools. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like really high quality tools for mechanics. But they also have these handheld diagnostic tools that you
Mm.
plug into the cars, because cars have like hundreds of EPUs, and you can get all sorts of diagnostics and error codes, and you can reset things. And so we built like the interface, the kind of higher level abstraction interface for these tools in Cork.
Wow.
And that was also Microsoft Stack. That was all C Sharp. I think it was called, I can't remember what the framework was called. It was one of these model view
But
controller.
that was running on the hardware. You were using
It
C
was running.
sharp
Yeah,
to
exactly.
to load on the hardware.
And it
I
was
thought you were going to say that was C programming at that point. So that's funny. It was C sharp.
there was definitely C modules in there for more of the kind of low level protocol communication with the car, but what I was working on at the time was that kind of higher level abstraction.
But then you had hardware with basic little terminal windows, right? Like there's no graphics going on.
Well, some of the more kind of modern ones had like full user interfaces. This was
Wow.
roughly around the same time as like with the
Is it
iPhone.
like the size of an iPad or the size of an iPhone?
It's this more the size of an iPad.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe an iPad mini.
Okay.
And they were obsessed with the iPhone at the time. Every executive, I think, in every tech company was obsessed with touchscreen and how the iPhone was transforming how we interact with computers. So that was a big initiative, was to move to that kind of UI UX experience. So that's what we were working on, and it was a technology driven company. It was much more aligned with what I was interested in.
So you're doing like mobile front end work mostly, right?
Exactly. I think it was called MVP at the time, the framework at the Microsoft
Okay. Yeah,
stack.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, model view or
Presenter,
MVC
presentation.
controller, model view controller stuff. Maybe I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know. Okay. All right. So, man, you went from okay. So now you're doing. I hate front end stuff, Peter. I hate anything that's event driven. My brain can't
Yeah,
handle it,
yeah.
and that's all that front end. I don't care what the mobile browser. You add one more button or you add one more event, and it just exponentially gets really hard to start keeping a mental model of the code. For me, I just can't do it. Like, what code just got activated because I touched this thing here?
Yeah,
It's really hard.
it is. It's super hard. I agree. My brain works more linearly. Like I trace something down like a stack trace. So I'm much more linear, I think, in my how my brain works. So I was more in the kind of middleware area here. I wasn't doing pure front end development. I've done that. I've done full stack in my time. I think the last framework I used was React and Vue.js a few years ago, and I just lost track of how many different. I think there was CoffeeScript in there at the time. I don't even know if that's still a thing. Yeah, there was like a new framework every 6 weeks.
I don't know how the front end devs do it.
I don't know.
I'm if I have to do any front end anymore, it's vanilla JS. That's it. Like it's it, dude. Like I don't want to. I just can't do it anymore. Right. I just went to Google I/O and I just saw all this stuff they're doing with CSS now, where they're trying to get rid of as much JavaScript as possible by embedding it in the browser via CSS, which I don't think is a terrible idea, because if you can get the CSS, like they showed a carousel
Hmm.
sort of UI, which would have taken 500 to 1,000 lines of JavaScript maybe, and now it's just a CSS tag or something. You know, I think that's a great idea, just to simplify just your brain around. That's basic stuff, I guess, at the end of the day, if you want a carousel, right? Like UI components or at some level. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's the reusability, like having the data with the component and that kind of reusability, and abstracting away the kind of server side calls. You know, we have a UI team here. They're all based, so the full UI team for Tigera are based in Cork, and they're excellent. I try to keep tab of what's happening. The other day, somebody told me we're removing Redux now, so we use React, and I always thought React plus Redux was still a thing, but apparently not anymore. Now everyone's removing Redux. So I was like, okay, sounds good. I trust you guys. So yeah, it's difficult to keep up with the pace of change in front end sometimes.
Not to get off your story, because I don't want to, but I would be super curious to ask this team if they're looking at any of the new like AI Studio stuff coming out of Google, and what sort of AI tooling they're starting to use to help. I think the AI tooling is really focused on front end right now, where it can make a pretty big impact. You still have to look at anything that's produced by this tooling. But I could tell you this right now, like if you took Copilot away from me, I'm a Go developer, Peter. That's what I do. I'm a back end Go developer. Okay. And a year ago, I finally said, stop aging out, old man. You got to start looking at these tools, right? Because that's what they are. They're tools. They're not intelligence. They're tools.
Yes,
And you have to learn how to use them if you're going to stay not even competitive personally, just productive, I think, at some point. So, like, if you were to take Copilot away from me, even though it's in my way sometimes, like, fight me, right?
right.
But it would be super interesting to talk to a front end team building a commercial product, especially one that has the flexibility to refactor technology in and out, which, Peter, by the way, kudos to you on that, because most shops would not allow that sort of refactoring to stay current. I think it's the only way you survive. That's another conversation. But it would be super interesting to sit down with a team and ask them what sort of AI tooling are they looking at, which one do they wish they had to play with, even if it costs money, um, and see where they're feeling like they're getting productivity gains with the tech today.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be. I can. I'm going to go back and ask the guys about that. So I know. Well, I know every tool that we're using in engineering at Tigera, but I'm not aware of some of these AI Studio tools that have come out of Google. So I'm going to look that up. But we use Storybook as our UI kind of component design library. We do have a UX resource as well. We use Figma. I know Figma's kind of gone leaned into AI as well recently, so I'm gonna explore that with them. What I do know is every developer at Tigera uses some form of AI in their coding day to day, whether it's just figuring out existing code by asking ChatGPT some questions or Copilot some questions. Mostly scaffolding at the moment, mostly like using it as a superpower for productivity. So we have some people using Cursor AI as an IDE. Most people are using VS Code. We have some Emacs and some Vim users still. We're a Go shop almost completely. We have some IntelliJ users, Goland users as well. Everyone's using some form of AI copilot, whether it's the actual copilot or some other technology, to kind of give them a leg up. And we're also exploring other uses. Like we use Google Docs for all of our software designs, and we have like access to Gemini business there for AI. So like summarizing like a design doc and being able to ask questions about a design doc, asking for AI to do a review of a design doc, or maybe even create a design doc for us in the future based off some requirements. Some really interesting things that we're thinking out there and kind of poking around at, you know.
Dude, I was talking to Robert Griesemer last week because I was out there in Google I/O, and he told me that they had they put up a design conversation up on GitHub, which is where they put it, and he had followed this very, very closely from the beginning, but there were like thousands of sort of entries at some point, so he decided to play with the Gemini. So he took this and he produced a 350-page PDF from every comment and conversation that was going on. And he said, I fed it through Gemini and asked it to summarize this entire discussion. And he said he was blown away by the accuracy of the summary. And he could test it because he knew in high detail the conversations that were going on, because he was part of it for the month or so that went on. It was mind blowing what the summary on the Gemini did with that, to the point where like he's like, maybe I don't have to like be on top of this all the time anymore, because I could do that. It was mind blowing.
It's a superpower. Like if you, as you said, it's a tool, right? And if you use it correctly, you just 10x or 100x your productivity. That's the way I definitely see it.
See, what I'm trying to tell developers right now who are sort of scared, a little bit scared. My answer is always, this is tooling, it's not intelligence. There has to be an intelligence behind the tooling. At the end of the day, that intelligence is you. So this isn't replacing you, because at the end of the day, it can only do what an intelligence tells it to do. And so don't be afraid of the tooling. You be the intelligence behind the tooling and learn how to be a better intelligence for the tooling. Now, I ain't telling you that in 10 years, maybe they find a way for this thing to be intelligent. I highly doubt it. I mean, consciousness is part of that.
Yeah.
But at least for the next few years, be the intelligence and be secure in that, right? And that usually calms all these developers down to the point where, okay, I think I want to learn the tooling now.
There's a lot of hype out there as well about replacing engineers with AI agents and agentic workflows, and you often see that though at the beginning of these new technology kind of hype trains. I'm not sure that's going to happen exactly. Maybe not today. Maybe at some point, but I am very similar to you in how I see it. I see it as a tool, and it's a superpower if you can do it correctly. And if you bury your head in the sand and ignore it, you're just going to get absolutely passed out. You just cannot do it. Even at my level, VP of engineering, we have to be looking at improving all of our workflows, efficiencies, and it's about freeing up the engineers then to be more creative and to work on the things that matter. So, yeah, that's how I see it.
Your task list doesn't go down or disappear. It stays where it is. You're just able to knock some things out a little faster, right? But people are like there's always another feature if you're an active product that needs to be built. You just got to it in 3 months instead of 6. Right. Like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah. And there's like these micro like productivity gains you get everywhere now. So like we use Jira for our backlog, and I don't know how many times I've been trying to build Jira filters for reports, and it's trial and error, and it's kind of a finicky interface, and eventually you get it. And now it has a little AI, kind of natural language chat interface for building a Jira filter, and you just tell it what you want and it just spits it out. And that sounds like so like minor a detail, maybe saves you like a couple of minutes, but if you add that up over a whole year and then you add it up on all the other tools you're using as well, then yeah, it starts stacking up pretty quickly.
Yeah, actually, it's irresponsible not to use it. At the end of the day, right?
Yeah,
It becomes irresponsible to
right,
not leverage it when it's working, especially when it's at a level now where it's going to work for you.
right.
Okay, so let's jump back in a little bit here. So, um, how long are you at Snap-on for?
I stayed there for a couple of years, and a friend of mine started working for a gaming company, and
That's
that
a
gaming
whole nother industry, man. That's a whole nother world.
my background is like across so many different industries and domains. I just get fascinated by different domains. I'm not like a deep expert in one specific area. I'll just get curious about a new industry and try to learn as much as I can about it. So yeah, Big Fish Games, they were based out of Seattle. They opened an office in Cork. So I jumped in there, helped them build their e-commerce platform. There was a team in Cork here that worked on that. It's like 14, 15 transactions a second. It was at the advent of in-app purchases in mobile games. So we had to build like a e-commerce platform for supporting all these microtransactions that were happening. It was all PHP.
Wow, that's new.
It was
Yeah.
it was spaghetti code would be like the kindest thing I could say about it. But we had some Java services then that we started to build out for some of the more kind of critical parts of the messaging queues and pipelines. So that was really fun. And I got to go to the States for the first time. Got to go over to Seattle to their HQ. Got my first experience of what an IPA is that didn't exist in Ireland back then. So, and I've had a few of them since then. So that was an amazing experience working for a casual gaming company.
Is Cork like the tech city of Ireland? Is that where most companies
You
tech
know,
wise are setting up?
it kind of is like Dublin is the capital city, but people from Cork will tell you Cork is the real capital. Uh, there's a big rivalry going on. Um, a lot of the big multinationals are in Dublin. You know, you have Microsoft, Google, Facebook, or Meta,
Okay.
Amazon. Like there's a massive tech hub in Dublin, but a lot of companies when they come to Ireland, they don't want to be in the biggest city. They want to be in the second city. Cork is more of a kind of town feel than a big city. So we have a lot of cybersecurity companies actually have. I don't know if it's by design or by accident, but Cork has become a hub for cybersecurity, and we have Apple here. They're the biggest employer in Cork. They employ about 4,000 people in Cork. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
I again, I switch subjects all the time, dude. I get nervous when you have a company like, say, Apple or Amazon that comes in with 4,000 people. Like the city of New York told Amazon, who wanted to build something in Queens, to get the hell out of here because they knew what was going to happen, right? Like rent and prices for everything was going to go up, and all the people that were barely hanging on now would have to leave to
right.
find, right? And so, like, if that happened in Dublin, I don't think you'd see much of a shift. But I have to imagine when Apple came in, you saw some of that sort of change in the economy with 4,000 people now needing to find homes and eat and all that.
Absolutely. Now, Dublin has had some effects of like that kind of gentrification of some of the parts of the city center where these tech companies they call it Silicon Docks. So Silicon Docks is like the docklands in this kind of brownfield site in Dublin that was turned into basically glass tech offices as far as the eye can see, and the rents and everything around there are sky high. So Apple came into Cork in the early 1980s.
Oh, okay. Early. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's kind of grown kind of organically over time. Yeah.
But imagine if Amazon right now wanted to open up something that big in sort of Cork, right? Like you can imagine why people would be so. Now, I'd like the idea of the revenue, but maybe
Right.
stay away.
Yeah. Yeah. Housing's a big issue here in Cork and in Ireland in general. Yeah, it's a very there's not enough houses and new houses being built. So we keep bringing more technology companies into Ireland, which is great for foreign direct investment, but we don't kind of keep up with our infrastructure to support that. And we're seeing the effects of that now in Cork. Not for any one specific company coming in, but just generally. It's tough. It's tough to buy a house here. It's tough to rent a house here. Yeah,
Yeah. So then eventually, it's like even in the States, at some point, everybody has to just move, and then there's another city that becomes that next sort of whatever the industry is, right? City for that industry. Um, all right. So how long are you at this company, the gaming company?
I stayed at Big Fish for a couple of years again. They unfortunately closed the Cork office. So I had my first kind of negative experience winding kind of an office down. So that was interesting. Somebody said there's no a kind of mentor at the time, a founder that I became friends with in Cork. He said to me, "There's no such thing as bad experience in tech. Like you'll grow teams, and you'll have to let teams go and close offices, and it's all part of like earning the scars." So that's kind of how I saw that, right? And it was tough. I think there was 89 of us in total across like localization and support and things like that. They offered me a job in Seattle, and I didn't go at the time. I just bought a house, our first young child here in Cork. So I stayed here, and I ended up working for a company, a local startup that was doing like project management software, kind of like Jira, called teamwork.com. And I went back to being just a developer, just an individual contributor after being a manager for a few years. And I absolutely loved it. But that company was like breakneck speed. They had a slide in the office, doing shots after work in the office and
At that
hackathon.
point, you're an adult, man. You're married. You got a kid. It
It
doesn't work anymore.
it doesn't
Yeah.
work. It's fine if you're in your
No.
20s, but I was
Yeah.
different,
It's
different.
scary, actually. It's a scary when you're at that point in your life and you're seeing that. It's actually nerve-wrackingly scary because your brain's like, this isn't gonna last, right?
That's right. And I love that
Yeah.
company. They're fantastic people there. And it's one of my favorite experiences. We built like a Zendesk type ticketing system, a SaaS product called Teamwork Desk. Absolutely loved it. It was the first experience of Golang. So that was all written in Go, and that was actually CoffeeScript and Vue.js on the front end. So we built like full stack stuff. I think that's when I came across so you mentioned I know of you for a long time, Bill. So I read your Go in Action book. I first learned how slices work from
Oh,
your
that's cool.
from your book. Yeah, I love that. Love that book. So that was around maybe a little bit after I started at teamwork.com. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And how long are you at this company? So it's funny because you saw like I had to work for a company after my first company folded, and it
Hmm.
was a lot of the same thing. They were just warnings. I loved working there. It's funny, right? Because I loved working there. I really did. The tech we were building was really great,
Yeah.
but always in the back of my head, my brain's like, you're gonna have to have a parachute out of here because some of the behavior just isn't gonna like
Yeah.
you just kind of know, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it ever happens, but it's kind of the same experience. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. You kind of yeah. It was a young person's game, let's say. And I wasn't particularly looking to move, but I kind of knew in the back of my head I was maybe at a different phase of my life, and at the time then I got contacted by somebody who was involved in looking for somebody to start an engineering team on a site in Cork for Nginx. So
Oh.
yeah, which pretty rarely happens. Like a new company coming in, such a famous company in tech. They were looking to open their first EMEA office in Europe, and they'd picked Cork. So
Wow.
I absolutely leapt at that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Set up an engineering team
But
in
what
Cork.
did you do there? Because isn't that whole thing built in C?
It is built in C, and very well built in C, very well controlled by the original team in Moscow, Gore and Maxim that developed Nginx initially to do the 10. I don't know if you remember, there was like a challenge at the time to do 10,000 concurrent connections in a web server. There was like this challenge that went out in the open source community. that's how they built Nginx to do that. I think Apache couldn't do it at the time, and that was kind of the formation of Nginx. So they incorporated a company headquartered in San Francisco, and they started building an enterprise product, and they started building like a control plane, like a management plane, SaaS product that you would connect all of your Nginx servers to in your infrastructure, and it would give you like this single pane of glass
Mm.
into your Nginx fleet. So that's what we were building. So we would mess around with some of the core code and C code and get told how bad it was by the Moscow engineers.
Of
And
course.
yeah, so yeah, no feelings were hurt. So we were focused on this single pane of glass management solution, which was
So that
a
means
lot.
like the Nginx would phone home with all the telemetry, and you'd be able to sort of present that.
That's right, and we had a bunch of agents that you could install as well that would go and like find Nginx installations in your infrastructure and then kind of aggregating and send that back from one central agent. And those agents would kind of control Nginx. So it was a different architecture to at the time to Envoy because like Nginx was developed before cloud native and before Kubernetes. So Nginx like wasn't API driven. Um, so you had to rewrite your configuration file, your nginx.conf file, and you had to reload the binary to make dynamic changes to it. So we built kind of the bits around Nginx to make it API driven from a central place, as opposed to a solution like Envoy, which has like that kind of API driven concept built into it to manage like fleets of envoys.
Just because of time, how do we get from here to the work you're doing at Calico and all that? Like, talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so this is my first experience then in Kubernetes. So I managed the team that built the Kubernetes ingress controller for Nginx, uh,
Nice. Okay.
which is quite popular. And this is the ingress API, predating the gateway API. So this is my first experience with Kubernetes, and just absolutely um, went all in on this concept. Nginx got acquired by F5 Networks. So I stayed maybe about 2 years after the acquisition. F5 is a fantastic company to work for, but obviously very different scale from Nginx. So we went from like a 200 person company to like a 3,000 person company overnight. Different tech stack, different tooling, different agile processes, or just processes in general. So I stayed for a couple of years, helped with all the integration and product development. And then I had an opportunity to set up the whole office here for Tigera as the site leader in Cork. So Tigera, we're looking to set up a HQ in Europe, similar to what Nginx I did. So I leapt at that opportunity.
How did that opportunity come across your desk? Like
Yeah,
that's
great
interesting to
question.
me.
It's a great question. I get asked that a lot because these job specs, they don't go up on LinkedIn, right? It's not something that you see advertised. So, like, we have an agency here, the IDA in Ireland, a government agency that support foreign direct investment. So, if you're part of that network, you start hearing about, potentially what companies may or may not be looking at Ireland. Are they looking at Cork? They want to talk to somebody from Cork that has done this before. So that's how this conversation got started. It helped that the former CFO at Nginx was now the CFO at Tigera at the time. So, and good friend of mine. So we had that connection as well. So it just started as me answering questions about
How do you
Cork.
get on that list? Can anybody be on that list for the government stuff?
Yeah, it's not like an official list. It's kind of okay. So this company wants to set up in Cork. Who should they talk to about the experience? So it was just an advisory kind of chat initially. Here's how I've done it before. Here's how recruitment works. Here's some of like the things you need to look out for. Here's some of the pros. Here's the universities we have, and like what's it like building an engineering team or an office in Cork.
But you got your name on that list to the level where you could have that conversation.
Right, right.
Is what I'm saying. So can I don't if I lived in Cork, could I put my name on that list or
You could 100%.
okay.
Yeah, definitely. There is a little bit of networking involved, a little bit of Cork is quite, or sorry, Ireland is quite colloquial still as an island, right? It's who knows who, and so there's definitely a bit of networking involved. And like as you're here in the industry and in leadership roles, you get invited to different events and different kind of boards and different entities and things like that. So you do make connections that way, and that's never a bad thing for being involved in situations like this. So it just started at me helping Tigera, and then at some point they said, "Look, we're going to need a site leader. Would you be interested?" And at that point, I had talked to everyone in the company at a leadership level, so I was pretty sold on what they were trying to accomplish.
What year is this?
This is 2021.
21.
Yeah,
21.
the end of 2020 started 2021, right in the middle of COVID lockdown.
Yeah. Right in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, so we didn't have an office until August 21. So we started fully remote, hired everyone over Zoom. I had to drive out of my car and like throw a MacBook at somebody from a safe distance, put a mask on, clean my hands afterwards. That's how we got going, which was a lot of fun.
Where are they headquartered out of originally?
They're in
You
the
know,
Bay Area. They're in San Francisco.
they're in San Francisco.
Yeah, yeah.
So what is the allure of Cork? Like why did they want to set up there?
It's there's a few reasons. It's the first stop in Europe from the United States, right? It's the closest to the United States. English speaking, fantastic universities, so you got highly skilled workforce here in tech. There's a bit of a kind of me too in terms of like following other tech companies. There's a hub here already established of the top tech companies in the world. We've got very, very attractive corporate tax rates for companies, which a lot of companies have leveraged. I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of corporate tax news
I'm
stories.
familiar with the lawyers that get involved when somebody wants to leave a company in Europe. Like
Yeah,
having a company in Europe is like really complicated in terms of workforce and hiring and
it can be. Yeah, we're very employee focused in terms of our employment laws. 100%. This is more about corporate tax. Like if you wanted to put profits through your entity in Europe, there's a huge amount of tax benefit to setting up in Ireland versus anywhere else in Europe.
so that's not like EU level stuff. Like each country can sort of dictate a little bit.
They can. Now, the EU have been trying to make it uniform for a long time, but a lot of countries have resisted that. Luxembourg used to have a very low, tiny Luxembourg used to have like international companies with a post box, address for tax purposes, and those kind of loopholes were closed. But yeah, you can still have a variation in corporate tax rate in Europe for the moment.
Because
Anyway.
I was hearing a lot of companies going to Portugal for a while. In fact, Portugal was like trying to give a large number of incentives for tech companies to come in
That's right.
as well.
That's right. Yeah, they even
Yeah.
got the big Web Summit conference moved from Ireland to Portugal as well.
Yeah. And that too is like from at least Miami is probably faster for me to get to Portugal than say
Yeah,
Ireland. Yeah, because a little farther south, right?
that's right.
That's super interesting. That I honestly didn't realize how many companies like these named companies were setting up in. I never get any training work. I got one training job in 2017 for I think it was one of the government agencies doing GIS stuff.
Okay.
I think. And like I've never gotten any other work out of Ireland. So I don't think of it's my bias not thinking of Ireland as having this level of tech companies
Yeah,
because
that's
I've never been hired by a company to do training there other than that one time, which is a
that's
silly way of evaluating stuff, but
that's what you have, the evidence you have in front of you, I suppose. Maybe I guess you probably started with Golang Labs back in
yeah,
originally.
everything's been Go since like
Yeah.
2000. Training probably started in 15, right? So
So maybe there's not a lot of Go houses, I think, in Ireland. There's a few in Cork, maybe about three or four companies are Go shops, and then a lot of companies here are still like Java, a lot of C++, a lot of embedded software. So maybe it's
yeah, that's
just
why.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, for sure. But you're a Go shop. I mean, you're doing Go over there, right? Yeah.
We do Go. So all of our Project Calico, I was actually written in Python originally for OpenStack. That's how the open source project started from a company called Metaswitch that were based out of the UK in San Francisco. And they spun out this open source project called Calico for OpenStack and written in Python. And we still support that. Some of our users want OpenStack solutions. But the original developers of Project Calico then saw the trend of container orchestration, where the industry was going with Kubernetes, and decided to rewrite Project Calico in Go, which made sense because all of cloud native Kubernetes is in Go, like most of the technologies there are Go based. So that was rewritten fully in Go as a CNI,
Yeah.
basically.
So I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Give me the 2-minute business problem. So I'm a software developer. I hate ops. I have other people that do this. I know enough to have a high level conversation about
Yes.
ops and
Yep.
Kubernetes, but I'm not the one who wants to start writing YAML and figure out, like, I just don't like that.
Fair enough.
That being said, tell me why, give me the 2-minute sort of business problem you're solving with Calico and why somebody should be looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And our target is that DevOps and platform engineer kind of persona rather than a traditional application developer originally. Now we do have some interesting features that would be applicable to general developers. Basically, what we do is we solve networking and network security for Kubernetes. So
Yeah.
when you deploy Kubernetes cluster, just like a vanilla Kubernetes cluster, nothing can talk to anything else. Like at a very super like 100,000 foot high level, your pod A cannot talk to pod B. Like there's no networking provided by Kubernetes out of the box. You have to install a CNI plugin to do the networking. So pod A can talk to pod B, and how those packets are routed across your Kubernetes network. So that's like the fundamental thing that Calico does is it's a networking plugin. And there's many other networking plugins. And now the cloud providers have their own networking plugins. So if you go to GKE or AKS or EKS, you can get their provided plugin, and some of them allow you to bring your own CNI and swap out for Calico. Why would you do that? Speed, performance, scale, right? Feature set. Like some of these offer different kind of features than the others. And then in network security is like the second aspect that you would need in a Kubernetes cluster. So in a Kubernetes cluster, everything can talk to everything, right? So there's no restriction. So once you network everything together, you can't by default say, pod A cannot talk to pod B over here in this other namespace. So you want to like segment your network, and we call it micro segmentation because traditionally like segmentation of your network is like zone based outward in a traditional network. Here it's all like east west traffic, service to service, pod to pod. So you can do really, really fine grained controls with Calico network policy inside your cluster and say this corner of my cluster can only talk to each other. This other corner here can only talk to each other. This particular pod cannot egress to the internet. This pod can only have HTTP GET connections coming into it. So really kind of fine-grained controls.
Do you support any not pod, a cluster to cluster
We
sort
do.
of communication too?
Yeah, that's a huge kind of trend we're seeing is multi-cluster. People and our customers, some of our biggest customers and users, they have clusters running some on-prem, some are in the cloud, like just vanilla Kubernetes clusters in AWS. Then they might have some in GKE. So they have like multiple clusters. They might have development, test, staging, production clusters, and they want to secure them all together, and they want to observe what's happening across all the clusters. So
I
that's
have that problem right now. I have clusters with large language models,
hmm
but there are some large language models I want to run on different hardware that I can only do in a different cloud,
right.
which would be in a different cluster. And I want what we're calling headless clusters. They're just running models, but I need to be able to establish a peer-to-peer connection because I don't want to go back through, say, a Cloudflare, right? A
Gotcha.
peer-to-peer connection with the security beyond, if I can, just token based, right? So
hmm
I'm going to have some token based, I guess, because it's going to be publicly available, right?
hmm
Like I'm running into this now
Yeah.
just because we need to be able to run on different hardware platforms, even at different cost.
it's really common now, and what you described is like an exact use case that Calico can solve for. So you can use WireGuard to encrypt the traffic between your clusters. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with WireGuard, but it's a
I am.
yeah.
I am. Actually, we were looking at maybe experimenting with Tailscale
Yeah,
to be able to establish the peer to peer,
hmm,
so it wasn't the spoken wheel, like just and
gotcha.
then use tokens, let's say, to secure it. Um, but all the visibility stuff, like at some point somebody was like, let's put a service mesh on it, and I started to cry. I said, no, no, I don't know if I want that level of complexity now on top of this. But
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I think starting simple makes sense. Like there's something called federation as well, so you can kind of treat a service in cluster B as if it's in cluster A. So you don't have to do anything special in terms of like applying network policy to that service. So you can have like a specific service in cluster B. You can apply the network policy in cluster A, and it'll apply across to the other cluster. So it's like federated. We call it cluster mesh, which I know the mesh has like a kind of maybe a negative connotation in
yeah,
terms of
it's got baggage now. Yeah.
yeah, it does. But it's super powerful. Yeah, you should definitely look into that federation, cluster mesh, and using WireGuard for the encryption.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Florin is my ops guy on that project. I'm gonna have him look at the Calico stuff. I didn't like my networking foo is like really basic. I've done socket level programming before, but anything below that, dude, I was even gonna take I bought a big ass book, and I was gonna like try to get my networking foo at another level, and I never did it. Right, like
Yeah,
networking is really hard, man.
it's super hard. And like, yeah, some of those books like the TCP/IP, I think it's called the Guide to TCP/IP. It's like a famous book. It's like that big. Yeah.
Yeah, I might have that. That might be the book. I don't know. I look at it every once in a while. I'm like, yeah, no.
We have some like network engineers here that have been at working on Project Calico for 8, 9 years, and before that at networking companies. It's a deep specialization. Like I'm a generalist, these guys are specialists. So I'm just trying to keep up with them when we're looking at all the different features we're working on at the moment. We have like traditional how Calico does it is programs like IP tables in the Linux kernel traditionally to make sure that all the routes and networking rules are programmed. We also have an eBPF data plane. So you can choose, and we actually support NF tables now. So IP tables is going to be removed from the kernel at some point. OpenShift are already doing that in their latest kernel for their Kubernetes clusters. And we kind of had a talk at KubeCon in Salt Lake City last year about NF tables with kind of co-hosted with Red Hat. So NF tables is like the future of like the traditional Linux programming stack. It's much faster to look up and program in NF tables than IP tables. So it's like an order of magnitude faster. But we also have an eBPF based data plane that doesn't. It's very different in how it kind of programs and shuffles packets around. And it's fast. So that's all about performance and scale. So
So
we
we got like
have,
5 minutes left. So
sure.
now I wish we had a little bit more time, but this is an open source product, right?
It is.
It says
Yes.
right there on the homepage, open source. So where's the revenue coming from? What's allowing you to put milk on the table every night?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an enterprise product and we have a SaaS product as well. So our enterprise product is based on Calico open source, and it has some additional features that you don't get in open source. We have DNS policy, and we have egress gateway, and some other features around application level security. We also have full support, obviously. So when you enter into a professional, enterprise product with Tigera, you get outstanding customer success and professional services and everything else that comes along with kind of like having a world-class networking team at your disposal. So we do gate some features, and we do continually add new features that are only available in our enterprise product. On occasion and over time, we will also add those features to open source, either at the same time as enterprise or maybe a little bit later. So that's kind of case by case basis. We have open source companies who use just our open source product, but they pay for professional services. And then we also have Calico Cloud, which is our SaaS platform. So Calico Cloud, you can connect all your clusters, all your Calico clusters to Calico Cloud, and then manage them from one interface. So as you mentioned, like having that cluster observability across your clusters. So that's what kind of Calico Cloud offers, and that's based on Calico Enterprise. So our revenue comes from our commercial offerings primarily.
Last question. This is the first time in my life I'm on a project where the word air gap came in.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm like, what are you guys talking about? And they're like, oh no, we need a cluster that you almost deploy from a thumb drive, and once it's running, there's no more traffic sort of going in. Like it has to be sort of frozen in time. And I'm seeing this again on the AI side of things, where companies are so paranoid about what's going on inside the cluster that the only way to update anything is to basically build a new cluster. But you still need some of this feature functionality, because you can't be blind. You have to be able to see even logs at a worst case scenario, right?
Exactly. So it's that kind of exact use case. Like we've always had the power of networking in our open source project, but what we didn't have was observability. So in our last release for Calico 3.30, we added some observability functionality that was previously only available in our enterprise product. So within, let's call it like a dark cluster, or within this air-gapped cluster, which is just one use case. It's available for any open source cluster. But just using that as an example, if you install Calico 3.30, you'll see a deployment running there called Whisker. And if you port forward and you look at that in your browser, you're going to see a web interface. You're going to see a tool that gives you access to our flow logs. So our flow logs capture all the network activity happening in your cluster, and it aggregates them into this view. So you can click through and you can see and troubleshoot everything that's happening in your cluster. These flow logs tell you this traffic from here to here was allowed by this policy, this Calico network policy. This network traffic from here to here was denied by this network policy. So it's really, really powerful. For the first time, that's available in open source. And you can also then stage your network policies. So if you imagine let's say right, you're about to like deploy new network policy, some YAML file, and it's going to lock down some network communication in your cluster. You could brick your cluster, right?
Right. I can't get into it anymore.
Serious damage, right?
Yeah.
So stage policies it's literally what it does, what it says on the tin, right? It allows you to stage a policy first. And you can actually see the effect of that policy. It'll generate flow logs for you.
Oh, like simulate what's going to happen before you.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. No, I would definitely brick my cluster for sure.
So yeah,
For sure.
we want to help people avoid shooting themselves in the foot with stage policy, and that's based on something called tiers, which allows you to have different kind of priority tiers.
And the Googles of the world haven't sort of provided this stuff yet. Like that's my biggest worry about some of this tech, is that if you don't get it as a drop down in Amazon and Google, you kind of are not in the game. For majority of people just want managed Kubernetes, let's say.
Yeah, I can. There's definitely use cases where people they don't care, and they don't even know what CNI is running or what policy engine is running in their cluster. They'll take whatever they get from GKE, AKS, and EKS, and that might be perfectly good enough. 100%, nothing wrong with that at all. They don't provide the same kind of functionality and rich functionality. The engineers there are more focused on scale and performance. So Calico, if you did want to replace that, we'll give you the extra features as well as scale and performance. It's really, if you want to get into the nuts and bolts, that's where you're going to start looking at Calico as a different option. So it's extremely powerful feature set that not all the cloud providers are going after at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny. Up until this last client project, I would have not really understood why I needed this sort of tech. And now I'm running into these particular interesting problems that I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now.
You can imagine, like you mentioned, large language models, the architecture in Kubernetes, they're very much like, there's a lot of internal east-west traffic flying around the Kubernetes cluster. And you really want to secure your model access. So if you can tell from a tool what has access to your model inside your cluster, and then you can go and specifically lock down each access point to your model until like maybe the API gateway is the only thing that should be talking to that model, for example. You can do that through Calico observability and policy, which is pretty cool.
No, and I think also with now SOC 2 and all the other things that you need to have certifications around in the industry today, like I don't know how else you can check those boxes without some of this.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, dude, we are so out of time. I even told Kevin we were going over because we were having such a fun. Dude, that was an hour and a half to one like this. It always does, man.
That flew. Yeah. And we probably could have kept talking for another hour and a half, I'm sure.
Easily. All right. This is Peter Kelly and Bill Kennedy signing off from the Ardan Labs podcast, and we hope to see everybody again real soon.